Good evening, everybody. This is Samuel Ronan. I'm running for Congress in Ohio's 1st Congressional District as a Republican, and this is my weekly live stream. So today's live stream will be about the FCC, net neutrality, tax plans, the one that is being pushed currently through the House and the Senate, the sex scandals, the sexual harassment, sexual assault allegations that are just ripping through Hollywood and our, well, elected officials, and then a Q&A session. I apologize for the last time where I just kind of ripped through what I wanted to say and didn't do the Q&A. I really apologize. Something that I want to address as well is that people are wondering why I'm not looking into the screen. So there's 3 cameras, my webcam, my laptop, and my phone. I have 3 different devices to maximize the outreach. So I try and spend some time looking into each. Also because of the fact that YouTube will have questions, and then the laptop will have questions, and the phone will have questions, it kind of mixes and matches that way. Gavin, if you can remind me to ask that question once we're open for the Q&A, I would be glad to. So, with that all being said, I'm going to get right into it. Gonna see how this invite thing works. Doesn't work very well on the phone. So, the net neutrality. Well, what can we say about net neutrality? First and foremost, if net neutrality goes away, if the FCC finally succeeds in getting rid of it and supplanting the Obama-era regulations, we go back to 2005, where these data companies, where these internet providers and these other online companies dominated the entire industry and were undermining the free nature of it, as in Netflix was combating Blockbuster, and they were dominating the online streaming. Well, they're still dominating the online streaming, and they would be able to be that much more competitive with Hulu. Comcast and Spectrum and all these other internet providers had already attempted to throttle other services and other providers, other search engines, other email accounts, and so on and so forth. So the issue is, if we eliminate net neutrality as we understand it, Facebook becomes pay-to-play, Twitter becomes pay-to-play, Google Documents becomes pay-to-play. None of the things that we currently enjoy for free, being able to search on Bing, Yahoo, Google, whatever you prefer, being able to have a free email, these things go away instantly. And the problem is, people seem to think that it wouldn't be the case. It's like, oh no, they wouldn't do that. I mean, come on. It's not like they could actually do that if there wasn't, regulations in place. Too many people would be up in arms. Well, I bring you the Patriot Act, which is the reason why we still have mass surveillance in this country. The Patriot Act was supposed to be a temporary measure to track and potentially find terrorist activities and organizations among the citizenry and take preemptive action by literally downloading, tapping, and having access to everybody's communications in the country, whether you were an innocent citizen or had any sort of indicators that you might be a terrorist or that you lean towards terrorism activities. Today, that is still ongoing. TSA is stronger than ever. They are more embedded into our travel processes than ever before. So multiply that by net neutrality, where this right here, this live stream, using YouTube, using Facebook, Twitter, that will go away. YouTube has already cracked down on progressive political pundits. They've already cracked down on the monetization of political channels. That's why Jimmy Dore has a Patreon. That's why Redacted Tonight has to go do other things. That's also why they had to register as a foreign agent. The problem is there are far too many issues that are currently happening right now against net neutrality, against free speech, against the ability to actually share our message with the net neutrality being in place. You get rid of it, and the caricature of corruption that is our federal government takes over entirely. So, of course, as a congressional candidate, I am vehemently against that. I can't imagine that's something we even have to discuss. It's like air. It would be like taxing air, or, well, we already tax water. So, you know, may as well just start taxing air. You get a breathing tax. You get a breathing what have you. That is the world we're finding ourselves in, especially the further and further down that rabbit hole we go with net neutrality. Now, some of the funnier things, of course, is, well, if we lose net neutrality, we lose open and free porn sites. And I say that, and I actually want to bring that up, because all joking aside, the porn industry is a massive industry, a multi-billion-dollar industry, and they thrive off of free marketing, and they thrive off of being open and aware. And you know, charging you, I guess, if you want to pay for it, but like they are one of the greatest innovators for open source programming, open source, you know, security efforts. We can actually thank a lot of technological innovation through the net. So for applications, for web browsing, for security measures on the internet, thanks to the porn industry. I know that's crazy, but if we get rid of net neutrality, that becomes threatened. Just like science and education is being threatened because it's becoming privatized more and more and more. We're not learning about science and history and mathematics. We're learning about creationism. We're learning about how to pass a test. When we strangle or when we inhibit growth of the mind, of innovation, we suffer as a society and as a country. And that's exactly what would happen if or when net neutrality gets thrown away. Now, I realize I'm doing this on a Sunday. Otherwise, I would get on the phone right now, stop the live stream that's on the phone, and call and show you. I'm putting my money where my mouth is, because this is ridiculous. Like, there are 5 people, I think all of which are men, I could be wrong, who are deciding the fate of the entire internet in the United States of America. And we see what privatized internet does in other countries. I mean, okay, the caricature of it, which is China and North Korea, where they have a complete crackdown on the internet. But then Venezuela, I believe, is the one that has a privatized internet where you pay for whatever kind of access you want. Now, as a political figure, as someone who's engaged in the community, as someone who's starting an organization that's centered around internet and the ability to use it freely, I'd be one of the few people who would pay for it, but it undermines that effect. It undermines that effort, because if this tool and this resource, the candidate directory and the canvassing app, are not freely available to you to download and to access and to view, it's a moot point, because I didn't want to monetize the access to it. I wanted to monetize the data collection, and at a very, very, very small and minuscule amount. Because what the difference between MPG Van and Nation Builder is they're charging you thousands of dollars for arguably information that you could spend hours getting yourself. In the case of Nation Builder, you get phone numbers. In the case of MPG Van, I think you can also get phone numbers, but it's for thousands upon hundreds of dollars, right? And the data, the canvassing information that you get is rather irrelevant. Are you a Democrat, Republican, or neither? I mean, not very useful information. But the candidate directory, the app, it asks you, what do you believe in? And on the candidate directory itself, you get to pick your 25 questions, or I'm sorry, the candidates get to pick their 25 questions, which are the primary viewpoints of, you know, major policies. And then you, on your profile, get to align based on that, because you answered your own similar survey of 25 questions, and you see how you align with candidate X, Y, and Z, regardless of the political affiliation. That's the point. This tool allows us to transcend the political processes, truly makes it free and open, truly makes it a fair and transparent process. However, it requires access to the internet. It requires access to this website for free without paying for extra special access. That's the difference. These tools, these grassroots efforts, our Facebook events to go protest down in Fifth Avenue and 6th, we can't do that anymore. We cannot collaborate. We cannot collectively share our information, our resources. Hey, I have a thread now. Put in all of the local candidates in Los Angeles. Can't do that if you have to pay for the internet and pay for access to Facebook, when most people struggle to just get on the internet. Never mind the fact that these public access areas where there's free Wi-Fi, they're gonna put that cost right on the customer now. It's free access because they already have internet through their networks anyway to do their point of sales and all their other stuff. It's all internet. That's the only reason why the Wi-Fi exists, because there's a benefit to the business plan. It's like, all right, if you guys offer a 10 megabit Wi-Fi plan in your store, we'll drop your overall internet cost by, I don't know, 10%, 5%, whatever, which covers the cost of the Wi-Fi 10 times over. But if this goes away, good luck trying to go to a coffee shop, McDonald's, Tim Hortons, the mall, what have you, and getting free access to internet. Public libraries, who are already struggling for funding, because guess what? Property values. Guess what? Republicans insist on cutting funding to education, healthcare, and, well, people, retirements and pensions. You're not even going to be able to go to the library. And your library card, that usually is like $1 or $5, maybe an annual fee of $10, jumps. Because now the library needs to cover that additional cost of providing internet and being able to give you the full unbridled access. We are attacking, in essence, with net neutrality. It is attacking the lowest income members of society, because they are the ones that will have the least amount of access. Just like rising gas prices affects the poorest of our communities. It's essentially a poor tax. Just like speed limits and the speeding tickets, they very disproportionately impact the poorest members of society, because $200 might not be a problem for me and some other people with decent careers, but for the minimum wage person, for the person working 2 or 3 jobs, for the person who's going through unemployment, which I was going through that too, $200 is friggin' $200, and that ain't no joke. So, again, I just have to reiterate, net neutrality is the one thing that is keeping our movement together. It is the one thing that is allowing people to promote themselves, to allow small businesses to grow and proliferate, and to do so much more than simply traditional means with traditional advertising, which is ridiculously expensive. So, we have to organize and fight and push to maintain it. Call your congressman, call your senator, call your freaking mayor. I don't care. Call the school board. Get them to push that forward. The more people who, I guess, uniquely complain about net neutrality, the less likely or the less grounds the FCC board has to say, oh, this isn't what the vast majority of people want. No, this is exactly what the vast majority of people want. We need, it's not even a want, it's a need, that net neutrality must remain in place. Let's see. Okay. Next, the tax plan. I kind of touched on it very, very briefly with the FCC. The tax plan, as it currently sits, is progressive. You know, there's a 15, 28, whatever. I even have a spreadsheet somewhere floating around on the internet that depicts what, if you put in your hourly wage, what you would expect to pay in taxes according to the current tax bracket. The current iteration of the tax bracket that's going through the House and the Senate right now, however, would absolutely devastate the middle class and small businesses, because what it's in effect doing is eliminating any sort of deductions from your what you would normally be able to deduct. For instance, small businesses, they'd be able to deduct this notepad, pens, a new mouse, I don't know, cup holders, whatever, right? They'd be able to deduct those expenses as an annual business cost. But with this new tax plan, they can't. They have to pay the full whatever, the full Monty, unless they meet a certain profit margin, which is ridiculous. Now, okay, not everybody's a small business owner, so I don't care, right? Well, no. If you are a single parent, you don't even get to deduct your children anymore up to a certain threshold. If you make $30,000, you make too much to get the tax credit, but if you make $176,000, you get a $4,000 tax break. It is a deliberate affront to the poorest members of society, and I want to say the middle class, but it's not even the middle class anymore. It's if you aren't wealthy, it's that threshold and below. If you're not part of the top 10% of earners in this country, this tax plan is not for you. This tax plan is to reposition the burden and reallocate the resources on the backs of the poorest working members of society. It's ridiculous. I can't even... I can only talk about this in metaphor and anecdote because the reality is so much more terrifying. And of course, if I were in Congress, you can better believe I would be railing against this. Here's the thing that people also don't understand about Congress and the Senate. If you've ever been to Washington, D.C. and you went to the Capitol building, you can actually sit in on the sessions of Congress and Senate, which is startling. That actually surprised me that you were able to do that, because you're in the banisters, you're in the rafters, and you're told, it's like, all right, you can go, but you need to be quiet, right? You can watch Congress say, yep, we want to get rid of healthcare, Medicare, taxes, whatever. Watch them painted as whatever, and you have to sit in the rafters and mind your tongue. They are saying this in front of their constituency. They don't look, of course, because, you know, the bright lights and the TV cameras from C-SPAN, and, you know, they're addressing the speaker, or they're on the podium and they're whatever. They're looking at, you know, the body of Congress on the ground. But the American people are sitting over them in the rafters, watching them. And they have never once been addressed. I have never once seen a congressman go on a tirade and talk about, well, how this is a terrible idea. Don't you think these people deserve an opinion? Never once have I ever seen that happen. And never once have I ever heard of that happening. And yet this tax plan is passing in front of, in the sight of Americans like you and me, regular people who are bearing witness to this, who will be directly affected by it. So I really don't know what to say. Obviously, we can call our congressmen, we can call our senators, and we absolutely should, and that's what we need to do. It's going to be much more difficult to find out what's going on in the world if we don't have free internet and free access to the internet, right? For unbridled access. So we have to impress upon our leadership. We have to blow up their phone lines. I mean, we have to make sure that we are inundating them with, this is unacceptable, in both the net neutrality argument and the tax plan argument. It's just, my election is going to be in May, and hopefully I make it into the general. And if I make it into the general, chances are I'll get elected. But then it's going to be a year too late. This tax plan will have devastated families, 318 million Americans, for one solid year already, and more. If FCC, the net neutrality, gets tossed away, we will have suffered for a year without being able to collaborate, which is something that even I rely on heavily. How else are you going to network throughout the country and get, you know, your online donations, unless you can be online and have access to DonorBox or PayPal or whatever else have you? That's the thing. Net neutrality and this tax plan are, I would say, the first shots of the war against the middle class, of the regular citizenry, by the wealthy and the elite. And it's happening today. It's happening in the United States of America in 2017. Fascism and oligarchy are embedding themselves in our political processes, and if we aren't careful, and if we aren't diligent, and if we don't spread the word of mouth and online now, it will be too late. I hate to say it like that, and you know, I don't know why people aren't already marching in the streets, but if not with net neutrality, if not with this tax plan that will devastate the poorest and the middle class in this country, what will it take? We have seen this apathy, this keep your head down and do as I'm told, don't ask questions, before in history. In Germany, in Russia, in China, in North Korea. Currently in China, North Korea, Russia. We cannot allow this to continue and to proliferate. This is unacceptable. This is simply an affront and a threat to our democracy, to our First Amendment rights, to everything. This isn't just about, you know, the internet and the taxes, you know, making our lives a little bit more difficult and charging an additional poor tax, if you will. This is limiting our ability to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is limiting our First Amendment right to free speech and to access information. The free press, the independent news networks, the Jimmy Dores, the Young Turks, the Democracy Nows, the Redacted Tonights, they only exist on the internet. Only. Period. Dot. That's it. That is the only place they exist. Maybe some of them have a syndicated radio show because in their local area, but certainly not national. Without the internet, with this additional tax plan, culminating in this additional burden on the middle class, on the poorest, on the working poor, it is going to be devastating to the American people, and we have to rail against it to the best of our ability. And better, right now, we have until the 12th of December to fight tooth and nail about net neutrality, against net neutrality. We need to go to our mayor's offices, to our congressional representatives' offices, to our senators' offices, to our governor's offices. We need to be out there at picketing, calling, what have you, even if it's just honking when you drive by. If everybody would just honk really loud and obnoxiously when they drive by their offices, it is enough to get the point across that we, the people, are upset, and we are not going to take this lightly. So with that being said, net neutrality, the tax plan, these are very devastating, very threatening policies that this administration is trying to shove down our throats, and we cannot allow it to happen. So on that lovely note, the sex scandals, the sexual harassment, the sexual assault, the accusations that is ripping through Hollywood and DC. What I really don't understand is that, let me take a step back. I am wonderfully just astonished and grateful that the Me Too hashtag movement has encouraged and empowered so many women to step forward and finally face their accusers and finally mention that they were violated and that they were assaulted and that they were abused or that they were coerced or that they were told that if you don't let me do this or if this does not happen, you don't get X, Y, and Z. I am absolutely just euphoric that this is happening. What I'm finding hard to believe is that this isn't crushing the Hollywood industry and people in office across the country, that this isn't becoming a sort of, I don't know if class action lawsuit, that's not the right phrasing. It's not even quite conspiracy, but I would imagine it's closer to that, where there are a copious amount of elected officials in the federal, state, and local levels who have been accused, who have had these allegations finally leveraged, and some apologize publicly, some deny it, some are still running for Senate with, you know, winning numbers, and some are getting endorsed by the parties and the president. What I don't understand is why people like the ACLU or the Planned Parenthood aren't pooling their resources and just bringing every single lawsuit to task. I mean, if you really think about it, we don't even have to wait until the elections. We could literally just remove from office every single sexual offender, sexual harasser, pedophile, for God's sakes, from office, from their currently elected positions, and have an entire 2018 special election, but where it's not even about primaries at this point. It's literally, these are all special elections to replace these abusers that are currently sitting in office, making and passing laws about women's rights and the ability to even report these things. Because guess what? The Trump administration is going out of its way to undermine reporting efforts, to make it more difficult, to make it less accessible, to make it less successful in general. So with that being said, you know, there are some people who may be taking it the extra mile. There are some people who are obviously filing and making false accusations for their own stardom. And innocent people could very well get affected. We're seeing it not just in the Democratic and the Republican parties. We're seeing it in our independent news networks as well. And that is the only statement I will make on what's currently going on in the, you know, the sexual harassment scandal world on the progressive side of things. But I understand and respect why innocents will have to suffer for it. Because for so long we've had this pendulum where men dominated, where it was men could do whatever the hell they want and get away with it. And if women tried to even go after him, they would be destroyed. They would have their careers attacked, their character assassinated. It would just be devastating for women. And it's slowly improved over time, but in general, it's taken the Me Too hashtag movement, the revelations against Weinstein, and several, you know, the Trump campaign in general, for it to really kick into high gear where women are finally believed as the victims and treated as such. However, because the pendulum was over here so far away, and the correct way to handle everything is somewhere there in the middle, the pendulum is on full just inertia going to the other end. And you know what? That's fine. As a man who already has been smeared in the media, when I was running for DNC chair, when I ran for Congress, probably a couple weeks ago, I've been accused of this, that, and the other. I'm not upset. I'm not angry. If women feel that I have mistreated them, that I was inappropriate with them, and they didn't feel comfortable to bring it up to my attention so that I could address it with them directly, or that I could change whatever behavior I was doing, then I am sorry. And I am guilty. And I am part of the problem. But I am also diligently trying to work it, to fix it, and to change it as a social and as a society, the way we interpret and take it. People like me are going to have to get hurt. People like, just in general, men are going to have to keep their heads down and be like, you're right. It's not funny to make jokes about boobs or butt. It certainly is. There's a time and a place, and it's not at the workplace. It's not at school. It's not as a professor. It's not as a law enforcement official. It's not in the anywhere where work or professional activities take place. And certainly not from a position of power. So I'm a congressional candidate. I'm likely to hire interns and other volunteers. It would be highly inappropriate for me to flirt with a female student, whether it was reciprocated or not. One of the things that have been really bothering me immensely is that I just read an article where law enforcement intimidated a rape victim in the hospital room because the rape victim was raped by their fellow officers. And law enforcement went to the hospital, which obviously implies that this woman was a little bit more than just violated. She's obviously injured in some way, possibly for the rape kit, possibly for more. I don't want to speculate, and I certainly don't want to downplay rape that doesn't result in broken bones or bruises. I'm merely saying the rape was severe enough that it warranted a hospital visit, and there were several officers who went there to intimidate her and not pressing charges against their fellow officer. If that means I and my fellow man in America have to stop making sexual jokes and sexual innuendos and, you know, doing inappropriate things that were perfectly acceptable 5-6 years ago, a couple months ago, doesn't really matter. If we need to stop our locker room talk, right? Locker room talk. If we need to stop bragging about, oh yeah, that girl, then that's exactly what we need to do. Because if we are part of the problem and we want to be part of the solution, then we need to put our money where our mouth is. And I encourage every single woman who watches this, hears about this, sees my campaign, sees the R next to my name, and realizes that I am fighting for this true equity. That this isn't some, oh, he's trying to get ahead of it, so when these women start throwing him under the... I've already been thrown under the bus. And I'm telling you, as someone who has been thrown under the bus, but that isn't a predator, please bring it to my attention. I would rather mess up and be told I messed up than mess up and not know, and then we have an awkward working relationship or what have you. And I would be willing to bet that the majority of men feel the same way, but there's also a strong number of men who don't feel that way, who feel entitled. The whole hookup culture that's proliferating, where you don't even say hi to a girl anymore, you just send a dick pic. That's unacceptable. And that has been the steady evolution of mistreatment and valuing women as peers and as equals and as citizens rather than just sexual objects. So the sex scandals, we need to go hard against these abusers, the ones who actually abuse their power, the Roy Moores, the Harvey Weinsteins, the Trumps, apparently in 2007, $7 million worth or $3 million worth of settlements, and I think again in 2012, there was a chart, there was another $4 or $5 million worth of tax-funded sexual harassment settlements against members of Congress. So clearly this isn't a one-off, just, oh, there's a few bad apples. No, there is a problem in places of power, among people with power, who do find themselves abusing it and find themselves trying to get away with it. I cannot abide that, and I will not stand for it. And again, I implore you, with the rising improvement and belief of women as the victims that they are, please have the strength and the courage to confront your accuser, to address your accuser, or the abuser, I'm sorry. Confront the abuser, confront the one who has committed the acts. Sexual assault, that needs to be taken into legal matters. But if people are being inappropriate, that's where it starts. It starts with the inappropriate behavior, not even realizing it was inappropriate. It's like, what do you mean I can't talk about your butt? I talk about his butt all the time. In fact, I just called him jiggly butt. Not appropriate in the workplace. Bring it up to people. Talk about it. Discuss it. Have a mature conversation. And if they get upset, they are the problem. Because a mature adult, a professional, will understand. It's like, you know what? I did call him jiggly butt. He didn't mind. But you know what? I understand that you mind. And I understand what's going on in our country right now. And I understand that even though that was fairly harmless, in general, and you even respect that it's fairly harmless, it does allow it to snowball out of control. That is the problem. And I will catch myself, and I will work better at addressing my jokes in the workplace. If we can get that level of intercommunication and that level of respect among coworkers, among the genders, among demographics in general, I think we would be a lot better off as a society. So, I kind of pushed over a little bit on the halfway mark, but I will happily start answering questions. Let me pull up the back right here. So, this is the Q&A section. I believe a gentleman asked me about my agricultural platforms and views. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know anything about farming or agriculture, because I don't. I grew up around it, and I understand, obviously, the science behind it. I understand, the regulations devastate the smaller family farms and this, that, and the other. That much I do understand. So my stance, so to speak, my policy on agriculture is, I think if we simply legalized hemp and marijuana and medical marijuana across the country, and this is going to get into the weeds a little bit, so if you need to take a drink break, I'm going to be a little bit into the weeds here. If we legalize hemp and marijuana and we just add it as part of the crop rotation, it'll, reinvigorate the soil as part of the crop rotation, so that you don't have to wait a full year. You can just wait a harvest to really just keep it going around. Secondly, just like with corn, 90% of corn is actually grown for animal consumption, as animal feed. Something I learned when I was first educating myself about domestic policy. So only 10% of corn that's grown in the United States is actually meant for human consumption. So if we applied the same principle to hemp and marijuana, 90% of what's grown should be hemp for industrial use, and the other 10% should be recreational and medicinal or whatever. Adding it into the rotation, of course, allows you to grow it year-round, and also allows the soil to be reinvigorated every crop rotation as well. So not only does this improve the quality and consistency of our normal crops and crop yields, but it also allows us to add to our economic influence the lost my track there. If we add something to our economy that currently wasn't there, it only benefits us as a whole. So if we don't currently have hemp products and marijuana that can be sold or taxed or profited off of, and we add it to the market, it all of a sudden adds something to the market. And as far as tax yields go, I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to talk about MMT. I understand MMT. I understand fiat currency. However, our country, the people within it, and as my role as a congressional candidate who may very well be a congressman this time next year, we talk about taxes because that's the way we can wrap our head around it. Anywho, I've already done calculations where every single yield, if there's I believe it was either 90 million or 90,000 acres are dedicated to corn in this country. And I know there's a factor of 1,000 between 90,000 and 90 million. I just can't remember, and I don't want to pull it up while in the middle of this live stream. Suffice to say, if 10% of that is for human consumption and we applied the same thing and we don't actually need to replace corn with marijuana, we could just add it to the rotation. We could grow marijuana side by side with corn on the other rotation of the fields. So if we dedicated 10% of that land to recreational use marijuana and then the hemp, we could generate over $1.5 trillion worth of tax revenue. And what I don't understand is why this isn't happening in general, because that's an amazing amount of money. But it's also something that can grow year-round. The whole yield process, right? The per bushel or whatever, it's however we would choose to stratify it. Even if you compare it exactly to corn, which is what this gentleman who was a farmer explained to me, like if we were gonna make marijuana and cannabis, hemp, a commodity, you would want to use similar cost analysis as we do with corn. And corn per bushel was like $3 or $5 at the time. It was like $3.50 at the time. It might be up to $5 now. If we charged $5 for a bushel of hemp, and then 20% of that would be $1, and we're growing acres of this stuff, we're talking massive amounts of income, and that's the difference. We're talking marijuana in itself is massively more profitable than many other crops out there. But of course we need food, so it's not like we would replace the industry, and you wouldn't have to, because it would be in conjunction with growing the food. So that's what I would do. I would also raise the threshold of regulations. So right now regulations are top to bottom. Whether you make $1 in profit as a farmer or whether you're Monsanto, you pay the same tax burden, you have the same regulations. I would have a threshold of where it begins. And I think somewhere around, $1 million or $10 million worth of profit, not income, not revenue, profit, would be a good starting point of where that threshold should be. And I say 10 million because I currently work for a tool testing lab, and they make about, $10 million a year. And what they do with that money, at the end of the year, they redistribute it into the company somehow. Either they buy equipment, they fix the building, maybe give us a bonus, what have you, right? It's not just going into the pockets of the guy. It's getting reinvested into the company somehow. I don't know if it's a massive portion of it, because obviously I don't have any say in that. But the same is true for farmers. You get your $10 million worth of profit. That means you could probably buy a new tractor. You could possibly hire a couple more farm hands, or maybe you can get better quality seed, or maybe you can buy more land, or maybe you can do X, Y, and Z. But $10 million, although it sounds like a lot, in terms of business, it really isn't. In terms of something that's that massive that you need to redistribute and do whatever, $10 million is kind of a starting point for the agricultural industry. And even things like retail that are also burdened with regulations and extra taxes and filing this and license that. If that was a threshold of per store, at least $1 million or at least $10 million, it would allow more independent retailers to start their business. For instance, here we go. So say you use hemp and you make blousing straps and shirts and whatnot. Well, you can't sell that at Target or Walmart because they just don't. But if you have, a few other friends that like they sell candles, like I know this is Yankee Candle, not somebody else's candle, but if you do that and you start just combining everybody else's storefront and then you share the profits or whatever, it's more possible because that regulation has been raised to meet a certain threshold so that you're not negatively impacted by it. So that's how I would approach regulations in general, but specifically for the agricultural. So, eating less meat. Fun fact, and this is one that I found out to be quite interesting. The animal industry is one of the biggest pollutants of, carbon emissions, methane, and so on and so forth, because of the feed that they have. If we went to a plant-based, hemp-based feed for cows and chickens and whatever else, it would actually massively cut those emissions down. Now, the article that I read and the several other places that I read ranged between 90 and 99%, but we're talking massive, massive reduction in methane and carbon emissions into our atmosphere simply by moving to a hemp product. So I honestly think we can maintain our carnivorous lifestyle. And I like meat. I eat steak, chicken, turkey, pork, ribs. If it made some sort of sound and it walked on this earth, I probably ate it before. And many other Americans feel the same way. Not everybody wants a vegan diet, and I certainly don't want a vegan diet. Not gonna lie. So what we can do is be more ethical in our approach to, of course, the animal industry, but we can also do due diligence and make sure that we're not negatively impacting our environment. A lot of the fertilizer is recycled from the animal industry and redistributed to the agricultural industry. So, there are pros and cons to having the animal industry. What we can at least do is make sure that those cons are significantly less. So, just to your point on that, Gavin. Let's see. Let's see. Looks like that was one of the main questions that people wanted answered. So Corey brought up a very valid point. He's a small business owner, and net neutrality going away would destroy his ability to compete and essentially stay afloat. That was one of the major arguments that I was making as well. We cannot allow this to happen because right now Facebook ads and having a website, that's pretty much the thing that separates an up-and-coming business that may be successful and just traditional advertising, hoping that people see your flyers at Kroger, or you have to drive to Kroger and hand out flyers and put them in the windshields so that people know that your business even exists. Net neutrality, folks. That's literally the only reason why we are here right now. This would not be possible if it wasn't for net neutrality. You also wouldn't have known who I was if it wasn't for net neutrality. I get that most of my exposure happened from the CNN debate, but then people started looking for me on the internet, started looking at Jimmy Dore, started looking on YouTube videos, seeing if there were other speeches. Just because it happens on mainstream media doesn't mean it's limited to there. And that's the point. If we are only limited to mainstream media, if we're only limited to traditional means, we are going to be devastated. Okay. Claudette Cohen wants to know how we should run as Republicans. The funny thing about that question is I already ran under this platform. So let me take another step back. How do you run as Republican? You use this platform. You use the progressive model. You use the populism approach. Republicans are not the devil. They're not the enemy. They aren't even a demographic. It's just what people in communities that tend to be rural tend to vote. And that's because the Democratic Party has simply not been accessible. They have not been available. They just don't do it. So with that all being said, people have proven that they care more about the issues and the policies. So when I ran last year as a state representative, I had a progressive platform. I had this very same platform: universal health care, education, improving our military funding so it's less wasteful, clean energy programs, building a mass transit system, solar highways, tax bracket improvement, although back then it was a full blanket tax rate. I've evolved on that since then, of course. Expand the 15th percentile, neither here nor there. And in general, like women's rights, POC rights, religious freedom, the whole 9 yards. And yeah, did I run into the pro-lifers who were like, I was on board with you up until you said you were pro-choice? Yes, I did. Did I run into the people that were like, my guns? Because I said, it doesn't make sense to me that you need to bring your gun on college campuses and at a daycare. Like, that's just asking for it. Even though the hypocrisy in Ohio is that you can bring your gun anywhere within the state except for government buildings. It's almost as if they're afraid that they would be targeted. Anyway, all of my policies, to include universal health care, to include universal education, were not only met with a positive feedback, but people even said that now those are some conservative values. I'm like, really? That's surprising, because that's actually not the conservative platform. And then I went into what Republicans currently were doing, and they're like, wow, that's ridiculous. So are you a Republican then trying to fix it? I'm like, no, I'm actually running as a Democrat. And they're like, oh, well, I'm not going to support you anyway, but thank you for the information. And it's like, you just agreed with me that the Republicans are screwing you over, that they do need to change their platforms, and that you even liked my agenda. But because I didn't have an R next to my name, you're not going to vote for me regardless. And they're like, yes, because we can't afford to let Democrats have a foothold, because then they'll just push their agenda on us. And I'm like, okay. So did I run into that? Yes. Guess what? I'm going to run into it again. Now with the R next to my name, if I go to dominatingly condensed, very densely dominated Democratic areas, that's densely dominated Democratic areas, simply by saying I'm a Republican is going to get a door slammed in my face. However, it's about the gerrymandering, which is the problem, right? My district is gerrymandered red. Where I currently live in Warren County is extremely red, 80-20 split. 80-20. Let me repeat that, 80-20 split. It doesn't get more red than that. Cincinnati, on the other hand, is far more 50-50. So if I can win Warren County, and I can get the half of Cincinnati that I would likely get, I win. That's why I'm running as a Republican. Aside from the fact that my platform is my platform and I stick with it regardless, but that's also the proof in the pudding. The platform is what people really care about. And if they're really hung up on the political label, then that's what you need to do. And that's how you need to run as a Republican. You need to stick to your issues. You need to stick to your values. You need to be unapologetic in them. That it means don't assume a pro-life stance if you're not pro-life, because then you're just pandering. And people will see through that. Now, if you're really good at lying, I'm not going to say not to, because at the end of the day, we're only going to be able to affect change if we get people elected into office. That is the only way it's going to happen. You see the memes like, well, if Congress were put on minimum wage, things would change real quick. Well, guess who decides Congress's wages? Congress. So the only way that's going to happen is if you get elected into Congress, or you help people get elected into Congress. There are 435 congressional seats open in 2018, and my primary is at the very least in May, and I'd imagine throughout the states it's going to be plus or minus 3 months. So between February and, I said plus or minus 3 months, so February and August, maybe even September, there's going to be primaries all across the country where incumbents could be replaced. Let me repeat that. The problem are the people who are currently in office, and they are all up for election, for replacement in 2018, all 435. So if the goal is political reform, which is what everybody claims, if they're Dem Enter, Dem Exit, Green Enter, brand new, whatever, all the progressive movements that are out there proclaim that we are doing this because we want political reform. Put your money where your mouth is. If you are Dem Enter, but you're in a gerrymandered red district, you're not going to win as a Democrat. You're just not. You will waste everybody's time, including yourself. So run as a Republican, primary the incumbent, stand by your values, and make them listen to the issues, because quite frankly, people care about the issues. And I have seen it in my own experiences. So that is how you run as a Republican. It's that simple. You do everything else that you would do in a campaign, knock on doors, handouts, try and give speeches, try and hold debates, try and get endorsements. All the traditional things, yes. Ask for money, get your friends to go out there, bribe them with beer and pizza. But stick to your values, because you will be amazed. Republicans in office, they are the devil. They are horrific. They are absolutely evil creatures. They are terrible human beings. The ones at the federal level, they are absolutely, they do not give a damn about you. And people realize that too, but they still vote for them because it's like, well, there's nothing better. Or, well, I'd rather the devil I know than the devil I don't. So if you run under the devil I do party, be it Democrat or Republican, and you challenge the incumbent, and you get the entire progressive community behind you, which is the goal, so that we all vote for one person instead of splitting it 26 different ways like in the special election in Los Angeles. If every single progressive, independent, what have you, supported, for instance, my race in Ohio, I would win in a landslide, to include if the Democrats supported me. The goal should be to replace Shabbat, the incumbent. That should be the goal. How we get there is irrelevant, because if I win the primary and then a Democrat is moving forward in the general, even if it's an establishment Democrat, as long as they are willing to be somewhat left of this guy, we're good. That's how I look at it. It doesn't matter who wins so long as the incumbent loses. And that has to be our focus in campaigns, whether we run as Republicans, Democrats, Green, Independent, or what have you. Because if our goal is not to replace the corruption, to remove it entirely and get those people out of office, then we aren't fighting for our values. We aren't doing what we're saying we want to do. We just want to be the heroes. We just want to be able to say, haha, I told you Dem Enter was the right way to go. Or, haha, I told you Dem Exit was the way. Or, brand new Congress, Justice Democrats, I told you should have listened to me because we did it. No. What it should be is, they're doing their thing, we're doing our thing, and it converges during voting time to push for the candidate that will have our values and our best interests at heart. So running as a Republican is quite easy. It's just as easy as running as a Democrat. You stick by a good platform, good policies, good values, and you let people know what they are. And if anybody wants help in speaking Republican, the Our Voice initiative is creating toolkits for candidates, as well as canvassers and supporters of candidates in the campaigns. We're working on building our own consulting firm in that we want to provide digital resources, like helping you build a website, helping you get your social media off the ground, templates for your branding, like business cards, palm cards, flyers, what have you, and help you get started in what the requirements are to get on the ballot and how to set up your finances and how to register. That is what we want to do. We're not going to raise money for you. We're not going to give you volunteers because we don't have any to give, right? That'll be an evolution. But the things that we do offer or are wanting to offer is going to be significant, because it took me about 4 months worth of research to figure out all this stuff, and then I had to make it through Word and Adobe, and it was just awful. It was just awful. If I could have even paid $50 to have somebody help me with it, or even know where to look, that would have made my entire campaign different. Same thing with the canvassing app, same thing with the candidate directory. These are the tools that make it so that we as people can really have a snapshot of the elections within our communities. So if you have the canvassing app and you answer the survey, your 25 questions, that same 25 questions can be put point for point against the candidate who might be running in your district. So if for instance, let's see, let me open that up real quick. I kind of do want to put it in the chat real quick. Loading. So if you go to the candidate directory and you click on any profile, it's randomly organized, so just click on the top one, and you scroll down, you'll see all their information, you'll see their platform, like, you know, their little blurb about them, a picture, logo, whatever. But then you get to the 25 questions. Those 25 questions are the same 25 questions that you get to answer on your own profile in the Canvassing app. Now, the Canvassing app itself has more robust questions for the canvassing itself, but we decided, and it made more sense, that if you had a survey and they had a survey, it needs to mirror itself so that you can do a cross comparison. Now imagine if this directory were full. Imagine there were 500,000 candidates, because that's about, I think, how many elected positions there are in the country. So every year, there's maybe 100,000 elections. Imagine if every single year 100,000 candidates filled out their stuff, answered these questions, and you have the Our Voice app, and you could actually pull up a list of candidates in your 10, 15, 20 square miles that aligned with a certain threshold, 70% or above with what you stand for. And then you can see what's that 30% that they disagree with, and then you can decide, is that 70% worth it, even though that 30% are lines that I draw. That is the future of politics in our country. That is the strength of grassroots organizing. And even though you might have your list of 3,500 names, put them on there. Get those 3,500 candidates to put their information on the campaign, on the directory, and get them to download the app. Why? Because we can consolidate our efforts. Why? Because it's readily available. Why? Because that's what it exists for. Because otherwise we have to go to you. It's like, hey, who's your list of 3,500? Boom, it's right there. Visually, there's a pin, and I can click on it, and I can get all the information I ever wanted. Right there in front of you, at your fingertips. That goes back into the net neutrality. This tool, the Canvassing app and the candidate directory, are absolutely worthless if net neutrality goes away. So I hope that answers the question of Republican, because I can put my name as Republican and then there can be the incumbent as Republican, but when you put up the values and you see where this guy stands versus me, you'll know who to vote for. And that's the point. We have to truly transcend partisanship if we want political reform. We have to believe it. We actually have to embody it and embrace it and follow through with it. Otherwise, it's just empty rhetoric. And I, for one, do not believe in empty rhetoric, and I am living my values. I am putting it out there. I am proving that it can be done. So, let's see. We're running up on the hour. Looks like Claudette, I'll finish with your question. Do I cooperate with folks like Tim Canova, and am I still providing a united front, or is it still sort of patchwork? So that's kind of the catch-22. I still support Tim Canova, Stephen Jaffe, Lindsey Brown, Jimmy Connolly, all of these progressive candidates. I do. And I'll give them shout-outs every chance I get. I hope they return the favor. But the whole patchwork thing is what I was just discussing. Everybody wants to hold on to their own list and their own power base when they could be so much more powerful and so much more effective if they put it into the repository where it is freely available, where it's accessible, where more people can go to it without having to find out where it was located. Because with all of these different organizations, they have their own list and their own website, and I have to figure out that they even exist first. Whereas the candidate directory is just open. You can even be an establishment shill and put your stuff on there. That's not the point of it, to just make it for progressives. It's to put a snapshot of your district and to see who's currently on it. So we need to start working together far more intrinsically, far more deliberately if we want to be successful in all this. And if I have nothing else to say on the matter, it's we have to start working together. We have to put those differences aside. We have to realize that they are both that these efforts are all focusing on the same end goal, which is political reform. And if we want to achieve it, we have to put those differences aside. We have to come together and vote for the right candidate, which is the progressive candidate, and we have to stop trying to antagonize one another and keeping each other from achieving that goal. So, once again, my name is Samuel Ronan. I'm running for Congress in Ohio's 1st Congressional District. I appreciate you guys coming out here, and I look forward to seeing you all in future dreams. Thank you.